Greetings, brothers and sisters. So I have a lot to get to in this video. I'm going to do it a little bit differently. I'm going to start with the voiceover portion first and then get to the various news events I'm covering in this video, which is like John Kerry talking about his privilege and why he gets to ride on a jet plane, private jet plane. I want to get to Trump and Pence again, a weird picture with Jojo and Jill, and I have a little bit I want to do on Marjorie Taylor Greene. I made a whole hour-long video yesterday, and it got totally erased. And so that's why I didn't put up anything yesterday. I got a story to do with that. But to start off with, what I talk about here, what's different about this YouTube channel or the way I present information, is that most people, the majority of people in this world, believe when you have a problem, when you have something undesirable in your physical world, in your material world, your life, you try to change the world. You try to change whatever's going on in your external situation. You work to change your material circumstances. If you're poor, then you try to secure a job or try to find some way to make money. You understand this. If you have a bad boss or a spouse that's negative or abusive in some way, you attempt to get another job or get out of that relationship. You change your external experience in some way or your external circumstances, then your unhappiness, your dissatisfaction with life will go away. Then you'll be happy. Because what this is about is being happy. That you're unhappy, you're dissatisfied, something feels off, something feels wrong on the inside. On your internal world, you don't feel good. Like you don't feel good, right? You don't feel happy. And most people don't really know why. Don't know why they don't feel happy. And they have been told, the system itself says, it's because something in your material life is off. Like if you just had this car, if you just lost weight, if you were just famous, if you were just, whatever, powerful, right? Whatever it might be. If you had a new house, you had new clothes, you had, something, whatever it is. Then this feeling that you have would go away. That's what you're told. You're sold by, the marketing team out there. And they spend a lot of time making you feel like you're not right, that you're unhappy, that, something's wrong in your life. I mean, this goes across the board. You don't smell good enough. You don't look good enough, right? Everything about your human nature is wrong. They sell you a problem, and then they sell you a solution. And so this is our modern-day materialistic system, that you feel bad inside, but it's because something's not right in your external world, in your outside world. And you have to change that to feel better. You need something in your external world, some sort of, a vacation, some material possessions, somebody who loves you or whatever it is, right? That you need these things. And to get these things, you need to do something in the material world, preferably buying some products or getting some sort of, whatever it is, self-help book or whatever it might be, to change your external world so you can feel good on the inside, that you can be happy on the inside. Which, if you understand it, just sounds stupid, right? And in that, you have politics. In that, you have a binary system. And what they do is try to convince you that there are things wrong with this world caused by the other party. This is how politics are marketed, that the other political party is at fault for making you feel bad. They're not serving your materialistic needs, and that's leading to you feeling dissatisfied. If you have problems, if you're unemployed or you're in poverty or you have poor health or any number of things, social issues, whatever it is, that if those things were fixed, you would be happy. Your dissatisfaction has to do with political power, especially on a national level, and you need a president that agrees with you and people in the Congress and the Senate to, Supreme Court or whatever it is, and they're going to change the world. So if you just give them your support, your money, your vote, whatever it is, they will fix whatever problems there are. so that you can have a good life, that you can be happy in the inside. And what they have to do is either not solve the problem but look like they're working to solve the problem or partially solve the problem, or create new problems that the other party has manifested. They say this, right? This is, or the things, more than anything else, it's about what the other party's going to do. If you let them be in power, this is what they're going to do. This is the way they're destroying America. And because of your family and your neighbors and where you live and the demographics you belong to, you're going to identify with one party or another, and you're going to give the support to the party that you think is going to fix the problems, and they never do. And you're going to be fearful of the other party getting in power because they're going to destroy the world and your world, and that never happens completely, right? Some bad things happen, whatever it is. But the whole thing is an illusion. The people who are asking for your support don't care about you. They don't like you. They don't even believe in what they're saying. Maybe they do, after a while, just because they've said it so much, they kind of end up believing it. But they're not serving you. They're working for wealthy and powerful people. And they're not there to solve problems, because without problems, you don't need them. But the bottom line is that you feeling dissatisfied on the inside and not knowing why you feel dissatisfied, and you relying on marketing geniuses and the external world and the economy and material possessions and degrees, and awards and fame and whatever it might be, material circumstances, to make you feel better on the inside, is the problem. That you're thinking that there's these problems out in the world that are causing your dissatisfaction, and that there's something out in the materialistic system, and if you achieve something, or you purchase something, or you change your life in some way, or you get a new relationship, or whatever it might be, that unhappiness you feel, or fear you feel, or whatever it is, hatred or anger or whatever it might be on the inside, will go away. And it's just ridiculous, and it's stupid, right? It doesn't work, because it's the ass backwards way of approaching change and evolution and dissatisfaction and unhappiness. And so what I present here in terms of my doing the Heartfulness meditation, it's something I learned from the Heartfulness system practice and to some extent the philosophy, but it's doing the actual practice that convinced me, and the philosophy is there to explain it. And what you do is, or the purpose of life, is to change what you have on the inside. And your material world is there to point out things that need to be removed, things that need to be changed, things that you need that you don't necessarily have inside of you, or things that are inside of you that are hidden away but need to be pulled out, need to manifest. And your external world will help you do all these things if you approach it in the right way. That by changing who you are on the inside, what you have on the inside, the world will change around you. The world will manifest into a whole different world because you are different on the inside. It's really your perception of the world that's the problem. Your perception of your purpose here on earth. Your perception of what's happening around you. That you're seeing the world through a distorted lens from what I've talked about before, some scaras, impressions, things that people have, addictions, and your personal preferences, and being played and diluted by, Donald Trump or Joe Biden or the Republicans or the Democrats or any number of marketing schemes and things that are out there, that you have a warped sense of reality. And as you get closer to God and your system gets purified, and there's a cleaning process in the Heartfulness system, and the transmission helps, this divine energy that's given freely in the Heartfulness system, God's love. And as you get closer to God, you start seeing the world in a totally different way. And so you change and the world changes in two different ways. The first one is when your perception changes, then the way that you see what's going on in the world changes. When you change on the inside, then the way that you react in the world that you live in changes, because you just perceive it differently. For example, if you have a lot of anger in your system or fear in your system, then inside of you have anger and fear, then you're going to see things out in the world that are going to create fear and anger in you. And if you remove the fear and anger, then you will look at those things differently. You understand this, right? You know, it's fairly simple. I mean, most people don't get this. Even most people who do the heartfulness system don't understand changing your internal world to change your materialistic circumstances. I mean, I sadly realize this. People who are, great people and have been practicing the heartfulness system for years and years and years don't understand these basic principles. And so this is, sort of stunning to me. And there's a difference between knowing what I'm saying, the words that I'm saying, the ideas that I'm saying, and putting it into personal practice. And that's also different. Actually believing in what you believe in. People say all kinds of things. They'll quote from this spiritual literature or whatever, some philosophy or psychological stuff, right? And they'll know it. They'll know the system. They'll know how it works, but they won't apply it to their lives, right? They still end up being a victim because so many people in this world have victim consciousness and feel helpless. And so if you remove the fear in your system, and there's, again, the heartfulness system works in this way, right? Where the sittings and the cleaning, eventually the fear in your system, at least all of it's that's unnatural because, fear is, there is a natural component of fear, right? A fight or flight type of response. But in terms of all the unnatural fears and all the paranoia and all the, phobias and things like this, when that's removed, when your fear is removed, then the way you perceive the world will completely change. The way that you interact with the world and the way you perceive events will change. For example, let's say you had this fear in your system and you had a day and there were all these things outside the world that you saw in the news, things that made you panic, things that made you, think the world was ending, whatever it is. And then you have an experience where your fear is all cleaned out and you have the exact same day. You have the exact same experiences. Everything in your day is the same, but your perception of the world and what's happening changes dramatically because you no longer have the lens of fear to look through, distorting the imagery, distorting your perception of what's happening out in the world. Same thing with hatred and all these things. And so as these things are cleaned off and removed, and you get closer and closer to God, and God is sharing your experience with you, you're sharing your experience with God. God's there, and you're walking hand in hand with God in terms of your daily life. Then your perception of the world around you changes. Now the world isn't some horrible place filled with disasters and dissatisfaction and everything's out to get you, and the Democrats are trying to get you, or the Republicans are trying to get you, or this demographic or this group is trying to screw you over, and the world's this predatory place. Wherever you see the world, right, in terms of the evil that you have inside you, you're going to see evil outside you. Whatever manifestation of evil that's inside your internal system, your perception of evil, is going to change the way that you view the world. And I can speak from personal experience that my perception of the world has changed even in terms of the way I make these videos, because things have been cleaned out and I see the world differently. And so, you can see it if you look at my videos over the years. Of course, they're not up right now, but I'm going to get around to unprivatizing them, right? And then, you can see these things. People have watched my videos for a number of years. The lens in which I see the world has changed because of the heartfulness meditation. The way I cover subject matters have changed, and I've evolved and changed with it because I see the world differently than I did before. And you can see this with other people because you have people in your life that you'll go see a movie with, or you'll go see whatever, you'll experience an event with them, and their perception and reality of it is completely different. They'll watch the debates between Trump and Biden. You watch the debates with an independent and you're a Republican and they're a Democrat, or you're none of those things, right? And you watch it with other people that have different beliefs than you, And you'll see that their reaction, interpretation is completely different. And the way that people are now is they seek out other people that have the same beliefs as them. And again, you really can't get along with somebody who sees the world so dramatically different than you. I knew my first marriage was coming to an end when I realized the dramatic difference between the way I saw experiences and events in our lives, my life with my ex, and her interpretation was going on. And the gap was widening. Like the interpretations were so dramatically different in terms of actually what happened, the physical events that happened. And I felt like I was remembering them very clearly because I have a good memory. And she was changing them, right? I mean, completely different accounts of what happened, right? It's like going to a movie and with somebody and then talking about it afterwards, and they saw a completely different movie. Completely different genre. Their interpretation of what they saw is completely different in terms of the physical events that happened, the experiences that you just saw, what the movie was about. But even like, all right, they were in a spaceship. No, they were in a submarine. It's like, well, no, they were in a spaceship. No, it was a submarine. You're like, what? So you have this different realities that people are having different experiences all around you. People's interpretation of what's going on is completely different because of the perception they have and the lens they have. And as you get closer to God, as you become more of your, a pure expression of your soul, your interpretation of what you see around you and your experience of it becomes more and more truthful. So it becomes more and more realistic. You see reality, right? One of the goals of the Heartfulness system is to see reality, to actually see reality as it is. And it's always it's like a goal that you keep on working for. Like you see reality more clearly today than you did yesterday. As you go through the cleaning, as you go through the process, and as you meditate. One of the books that the second master of the system, Babaji, wrote was called Reality at Dawn, where you're meditating and you have this reality. You perceive reality different through the purity of the meditation. As you become a more purified person on the inside, then God shows you reality in a whole new way. And the second way that the world changes from working on your insides is that by working on your insides, you literally change the world on the outside. Partly it's due to perception, because your view of the world and everybody's collective view in the world creates a composite of the way the world is structured. But also you're manifesting the world from the inside out. And most people know this without knowing it, because when you want to change something, let's say you have something that's, all right, something's bad in your life. You're like, oh, this is making me unhappy. This is making me dissatisfied. I'm poor and I need a job. And so then you go, all right, let me come up with some ideas of what I can do, right? So you start thinking, all right, how am I going to change my circumstances? And, it might be, all right, well, I can't get a job because I don't have any training. So you come up with an idea, I'll go back to school, or I'll take a course, or, I'll do an internship, or I'll do something. Like you're working inside yourself, you're problem solving. You're coming up with ideas how to change your external circumstances, right? I'm hungry. What am I going to do? Okay, well, I'll go and drive in my car and I'll go down the street to the store, to a restaurant, and I'll buy some food. The idea is first, there has to be an idea and a plan and a goal, right? Okay, I'm hungry. Well, the goal is I have to get some food. Then I have to come up with a plan. How do I do that, right? Well, you can go to the refrigerator and look to see if there's something to cook. No, I don't want any of those things, or there's nothing in the fridge. Okay, so I go to the store, I go to a restaurant, whatever it might be. And then it becomes a thing of, well, I'm going to be hungry in the future. So what do? Well, you go get a job, you make money, or you plant food in your farm or whatever it is, right? You buy some land. These are all ideas. You come up with a plan and goal and things. I went to this job, I got money, I had to come up with a plan to get this job. I had to come up with internal solutions and problem solve things in my insides at work to complete my tasks at my job, right? You had to go to school and, maybe get a college degree or whatever to get your job. then you have to buy a car and things like this. You have to, again, these are all plans and things that you're doing, things that you are problem solving. And then you make a list. So these are the things I'm going to want to eat in the next week or so. And then you go to a grocery store, you have your list that you created inside yourself and then wrote down on a piece of paper or your phone or something. And if you're buying food for, more than one person, you have family members and they have things they want to eat, and then you bring it home and now you have to organize it. You have to put things away. You have to refrigerate things that need to be refrigerated. You have to put them in a way that you can remember where they are later on. This is all stuff that's going on inside yourself. And then when you get hungry, you're like, all right, this is what's for dinner. You already have it planned out. You've solved that problem ahead of time. You already know what you're going to make for dinner. You have a meal plan and things like that. You know that you're going to be hungry, and these are ways of solving this in the future, right? You know you're going to be hungry in the future, so you've solved this problem. You've created this internally, and you've manifested this stuff in the form of food in your kitchen or whatever. Or we're going to go out to eat this day, right? You have these plans that you've made, and all these plans come from the inside out. So everybody knows this, but they don't really think about it. That you're solving your problems in the material world all the time internally. But when you have this slight little switch, right, and it takes some work and effort because you've been indoctrinated, we've all been indoctrinated to think just the opposite. That when you have a problem in the outside world, you have something that is undesirable and you don't like, and it pulls out things, it's there to pull out things that are inside you, whatever they might be. That God and your soul are creating these problems and miseries and things for a reason. That the point of life isn't to indulge and be happy. You've been lied to. We've been all lied to. It's not the pursuit of happiness. That has nothing to do with why you're here. That has nothing to do with why anybody's here. It's not to be happy. It's not to be. Happiness is there. And of course, you're going to want to be happy. You're going to work towards being happy. And you're going to want to have pleasures. Like pleasures are desirable. But pleasures and happiness aren't why you're here. You're not here to indulge. You're not here to just party and have a happy life. You're not here to stimulate your senses. You can enjoy these things, right? You enjoy the beautiful world and the pleasures and things. There's nothing wrong with that. But that's not the purpose. You're here for your soul to evolve. You're here for your soul to get closer to God. And that's, people have to understand this on their own terms. But this idea that I'm here to return to the source, to return back to, my creator, was something that I learned from the Heartfulness system. I said, all right, whatever, I'll give it a try, I'll take your word for it for now, right? I'll play along. And it's proven right to me over and over again that there is a spiritual purpose, that your soul, which is eternal, is using your life, which is temporary, to move forward on your spiritual journey. You have a spiritual purpose. Your soul has a purpose, and it's a return to the source. And this life is a part of that. And when you have troubles and miseries, it's there to point out things that are blocking your path, things that need to be removed, obstacles, problems to solve. And when you solve those problems in the correct way, when you, like going through a video game, but a spiritual video game, and you become a better person for it, and your lens changes, and you now have a clearer perception of the world, and you are closer to God, right? The obstacle that was blocking your path back to the source and blocking your connection with God is now removed. So the materialistic obstacles are there to clean out what's in the obstacles that are inside of you. And so it's a completely different orientation to life. And like I said, I know there's lots of old-time practitioners of the Heartfulness system. They haven't even really understood this or been able to put it into their practical experience. I mean, it's sad because, I'd like to say that once you're presented with this wonderful opportunity of the Heartfulness Meditation system, that once you start doing it and you start benefiting from it, the cleaning starts helping you and the transmission starts helping you, that you would understand the basic principle and fundamental reason for the system. And you understand it maybe on a mental level. People do. Many of you can understand the words I'm saying, understand these concepts. It's not that hard. That we're not here to solve and create a better world in the sense that the world is what's making us unhappy, is that we're supposed to get rid of the stuff that's making us unhappy, the things that are, plaguing us, our fears, our addictions, our, misperceptions, our entitlements, our egotistical way of approaching the life, our narcissism, all these things, that we're here to cleanse those things out of our system. And then the world will be better, just the world we're living in. Because a person who has a clean internal world and has a natural, they have the innocence of a child, and their soul is manifested in a way that's much more pure than a normal person, their life will be a breeze. They'll look at everything with gratitude and, not with anger and dissatisfaction. They're not going to be complainers, right? They're not going to be entitled. Why is this going the wrong way? Why is it so hard, right? This is how people perceive the world, because they suck on the inside. They're entitled little brats, whatever it is, and they have a miserable existence. You'll be around rich people who have everything in terms of the material world, and all they do is complain. They don't have, anything really to worry about. They have all their material needs. I mean, their needs are easily met. They have food and clothing, all these things, but they have multiple houses, and they have, all of these wonderful, opulent things that most people don't have, and yet they're miserable, and they complain all the time, and they want more, and even when they get more, it isn't enough. Or rich and famous celebrities that when you're around them, they're miserable, and everyone wants to be famous and rich and all these things. That's a goal of the American system. And then you're around these people, and you see them, you're like, they're totally unhappy. And they're kind of, they're not good people on the inside. So when you change what you are on the inside, then your life changes no matter how bad the world is. Like you perceive something completely different. There's a great story the third master of the Heartfulness system told in many of his talks. So you take two guys, right? Two guys, one of them is, pure of heart. The other one's like a little bitch, right? And not his words. I'm just sort of paraphrasing. And they're, in love with a girl. And one of them is only, his ability to be in love is limited because he's such a little bitch. But the other guy has a pure heart, and he's got courage and all these things. And so the first guy, the guy who's sucky on the inside, he's going to see her, and he's like, he's got to cross a river. And he's like, well, there's some rocks in the river, but they look a little bit like a crocodile. So he can't cross the river, right? And if he got across the river, he would have had to climb up to the girl's window, and there's a rope hanging out, but he would see it as a snake, and so he wouldn't climb up the window. So he never goes to see his beloved because he's scared of everything, right? He's got all this fear, and his desire to be with her and her love isn't strong enough. Where the other guy, who's pure of heart, it's dark out, right? And he's like, all right, I got to cross the river. Oh, there are some stones. He runs across the river, and it's a crocodile, and the crocodile snaps at him, but the guy doesn't even notice because he's, so in love and so pure of heart. And he gets across the other side, and he's like, oh, there's a rope going up to my beloved's window. He climbs up the rope, turns out to be a python, but he doesn't notice because he's so in love. And then, the next day the sun comes up, and him and his beloved go outside, and, he looks and he sees that it was a crocodile. He sees it's a snake, and he's like, okay, it doesn't matter, He just perceived it differently. And so the one person perceives solutions to his problem, the rocks and the rope, as obstacles. They're actually things there to help him on his journey, but he sees them as liabilities, things to be scared of. Where the other guy sees these obstacles, these things, the snake and the crocodile, things that he should be wary of, he sees them as opportunities to achieve his goal. Beautiful story, beautiful, analogy of, the difference in the way people perceive the world. And there's so many people who have been locked in and indoctrinated to this political realm, and, they can't solve the problem. The problem is that our system is going in the opposite direction, and it's telling you the wrong thing. It's telling you the wrong reason for your being here on this planet. It's telling you that you have a materialistic reason for being here, and a demonic one when you get to the, the whole systemic thing, which I'm not going to cover here, the economy and the perception, and that's the reason for your existence here. And it's clearly not. And once you understand that the system is turning you in the wrong direction and getting you to go in the wrong direction, and then the person that you are on the inside then is used to manifest this illusion, this delusion of our materialistic life where everyone's dissatisfied because their soul and God they're disconnected from soul and God inside of them. And your religion's doing this as well, because your religion is part of it. Your religion has been compromised and used in this deception. And you feel like, well, unsettled inside all the time. You're depressed, you're sad, you're angry, you're all these things because you're not doing what you're supposed to do here. And the system, therefore, can't be changed. I had somebody write me something on Instagram, I think yesterday. This is partly why I'm making this video. And the person said, yeah, I believe in just let it happen, but how can we just let these things happen? And it was some, political thing to do with COVID. And I'm like, well, you can't fix the system. That's the point of my channel. The system is wrong. Like, you can't fix a system that its whole, the foundational building blocks of the system is to take you away from your divine purpose and manipulate you and draw you away like, Pied Piper playing the flute or whatever and marching you off the cliff, right? Leading you down the wrong path, leading you away from God and your soul's purpose. You can't fix a system like that. So the system has to go. And yeah, it sucks. We're 100% dependent on it. And we have all these internal weaknesses and, physical weaknesses that we can't do anything about for the most part. I mean, we can try to get rid of them. We can work on it and become better people. We don't have a backup plan. So our need to depend on this system, our need to have this system exist is there, right? That's true. That's a real thing because we're dependent on it. We've been addicted to it. We're hooked into it. And when it goes, people are going to be thrown into panic and chaos and all these things, right? Most people. And it's a good thing. And it's a thing that, needs to happen. It's something that's positive. But there's no way that it isn't going to suck on some level, right? There's no way of avoiding the suckiness. And so our fear of the difficulty that that's going to present to all of us and the chaos and the change that we all have to undergo when that happens is the problem, right? That that's a real problem. It's hard to prepare for something like that. And it's an unknown. So I understand that personally because I feel it too, but I know that the system has to go. Not because I'm going to make it go, because it's not going to last forever and it's bad. Two things. That it's an obstacle to, our internal growth. It's taking people in the wrong direction, so it's bad. And also it's time. Its shelf life is up. Its lifespan is over. And so it's these things, right? It's nothing to do with what I want or whatever. It's just the way it is. It's just, really what I want or what you want doesn't matter. It just doesn't. Our souls want something different. Our, connection to God and our spiritual path and what God wants is something different than what our egos want. And so that's our misperception of reality. We have been led down the wrong path and we've been made weaker and entitled, and our perception of what life is about is wrong and all these things. And because of our perception, our warped perception, it's going to sting a lot when the system collapses. What we believe, people believe that America is the greatest country in the history of the world. Anybody who believes that is in for a hard, cold dose of reality. And it's just going to keep on coming. And so I want to preface this video by explaining this thing first. So I was making this video yesterday about Marjorie Taylor Greene and what a nightmare she is for the truth community and how she's, the worst representative for people in the truth community and for people who are Republicans. And I had all these clips and, first of all, when I make these, there's a program I use with Apple. It's the best program. It's one of the reasons I switched to Apple, called ScreenFlow. And that's how I capture videos, whatever it is, when I'm doing shots of like news articles that I read, also when I'm capturing a video or something. and it's just an unbelievable product. And all the other softwares I used on Microsoft weren't a tenth as good as. So how I make these videos, I have a couple of different softwares that I use. I use a couple of Adobe products, Audition and Premiere Pro. So right now I'm using Audition and I'm speaking to a microphone. So that's the first half of this video. That's usually what I do at the end of the video. And then I take the ScreenFlow and I do the voiceover where I'm reading articles or capturing videos and things. And so after I'm done recording, there's this ScreenFlow screen that comes up and I render the video. There's a raw video and it's in some sort of whatever. It's in one file and they put it into another file and that takes whatever, If it's a 10-minute video, it takes 2 minutes or something. And then I import it into Premiere Pro, and then Premiere Pro I edit it and I add voiceovers and I try to match up all the different volume levels because the volume will be different between this voiceover and in Audition as opposed to the voiceover and the ScreenFlow. So it's all these things that I do, and I usually come up with some more ideas and I add them, or I figure a better way to say something as I'm listening to it. And then after I've edited all those things, I render it again. I make the video into the video that you see. So it goes through a couple of rendering processes in 2 different applications, and there's all these various technical things you have to do, and I've had to learn from watching YouTube videos, and I'm okay at it. I'm not really great at it. There's so much to know in all of these programs. Like the majority of the commands and things that you can do in ScreenFlow and Premiere Pro and Audition, and I use Photoshop as well, I know about 1/100th of what you could know. I just know what I need to know to make my videos. And so I was making this video on Marjorie Taylor Greene. It was called Mama's Gonna Make All of Your Nightmares Come True, from the Pink Floyd The Wall song, right? And there were some funny parts and some good parts. But I did 2 different ScreenFlow screen capture segments. One was 9 minutes long, the other was 25 minutes long. And there's things that needed to be edited out. And I had some problems. Like the other day I did a whole ScreenFlow thing, and it was 25 minutes long, and the audio was completely messed up. And I just put in an update, and usually the updates are good and are so much better for Apple. There's usually not so many problems, but I just put an update in the day before. And when I'm copying a video, when I'm grabbing a video with ScreenFlow, I have to turn my microphone off, or there is this, you'll see in some of my older videos, there's this reverb, and that's because I didn't turn my microphone off, and one day I realized if I turned my microphone off, that didn't happen. And so that's been a benefit, but once in a while I forget to turn my microphone back on. So I started to make my ScreenFlow video about Marjorie Taylor Greene yesterday, and my microphone was off, and I made about a 15 or 20 minute segment, and a lot of it was, I did this whole, introduction and things. I was talking quite a bit. And when I realized this, I was bummed, right? Because I just spent all this time and energy, and once in a while, something doesn't come out the way it's supposed to. There's an audio issue, it doesn't render correctly, and I have to redo it. And when I have to redo something, sometimes it gets better, but sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes I can't recreate it as good as I did the first time, and that's just the way it is. And so then I had to do the ScreenFlow things again, and I came up with a 9-minute file and a 25-minute file. And I had another 15-minute voiceover to go with it. And so I rendered the 2 ScreenFlow files, and I imported them into Premiere Pro. And the longer one of the 2, it wasn't right. There was something corrupt about the file. And I tried a bunch of things. I rendered it again. And while I was doing that, I was listening to the audio portion, which I usually do last because it was going to go at the end of the video. And so it's a long audio file that's, 20 minutes long, and I cut it in half, which ended up causing a problem at the very end. So I had a number of issues to start off with. And then I re-rendered the original ScreenFlow file, and I restarted the computer, and I had to reboot the Premiere Pro because it wasn't working right. And I've had some winter health issues. It seems like I had the kind of COVID, or in terms of the way it relates to my system, where once in a while it comes back in a very mild form. Like, I don't think I get like a sense I have COVID, but I get some of the symptoms that I had while I had COVID. Some of the things that happened afterwards and how it lingered. There's people who get COVID and it never goes away. They get it for months at a time, low grade fever and things like that. And that's not how I have it, but it's like, herpes, herpes is a virus and people have herpes. Almost everybody in the world has some form of herpes. They've been in contact with it. And some people, it expresses itself whenever your immune system is down or something happens, right? And so this is the way that I'm experiencing COVID, that whenever I'm struggling a little bit this winter, I have some lingering health things. So I've had some good days and low energy. So something like this is a complete bummer when I have issues with the video. And so then I went through the video and I added a lot of voiceover, and there were some mistakes I made and things. And it took a long time, and it ended up being like a 50-minute video. The other thing I've struggled with is I use different forms of microphones. I use a handheld microphone. And the one I have now has a cord that is a USB-C to a USB-C. Usually the microphone has a different port that the cord plugs into, whatever it is, I forget the name of it. The USB-C is the one that Apple uses. Instead of a USB port, they have these smaller USB-C ports that are supposed to be better. And it seemed like this microphone worked better. I used an ATR, whatever it is, right? It seemed like this one worked better than other versions of the same mic. And so I bought a couple of them because I go through them, right? They just, every once in a while they short out. And I have a whole bunch of them. I was going to someday do some sort of like giveaway or something like that to members, to, viewers. I just never get around to something like that, but I got a ton of them. And they just wear out, and I usually have to change the cord 2 or 3 times. So I bought some cords. I had to buy different cords, and every cord that I bought was just a phone charging cord. So I contacted the company, and I emailed somebody, and I'm like, these cords don't work, and I need to get a cord, and you guys don't really offer replacement cords. The person said they did, but I couldn't find it on their website. And so I, got this situation where I need to get new cords, and, when the cord isn't right, there'll be interference, and once in a while it'll disconnect, and I'll be using the microphone that's on the computer itself. So I got these, some technical issues going on, right? There's a difference between cords, and I can't find a way to get a cord that works with a microphone or headphones, because that's a different type of cord than a charging cord. And I'm just not that technologically savvy, and so I've had this issue, right? So I got these 2 microphones sitting in the box, and this one's still a good microphone, but I don't have a cord for it. And the cord's starting to not work as well. So I had all these technical issues. So I made the whole video, and I'm now down to the part where I had made the voiceover, which I've already listened to. But because I had cut the voiceover in several segments, somehow I had made it so I'd overlapped, and I erased some of the voiceover. So I had to go through it and fix all that, which was kind of a bummer. I was kind of had low energy, wasn't feeling great. I was tired yesterday. And then when I was doing that, I clicked on some button. I hit some button by mistake, and it changed the interface. It changed the window in which I was seeing Premiere Pro. And I could have rendered the video. The video was done. I'd fixed all the problems. And I could have rendered it right then and then tried to figure out what I had just done. But I wasn't thinking, I didn't make a good decision. And I ended up erasing the whole video. It's done, ready to be rendered, a 50-minute video. It took me about 4 hours. It was, a more heavy-duty video. And it was a complete bummer, and it was gone. And for me to reproduce the whole video, it was like, I'm not doing it. It's just, I felt like there were so many problems with the video that maybe there was something in the video that would have been seen as a community guidelines violation. There's going to be some problem, and there was a reason why. It's just, I was like, I'm just not going to do it. I'm whatever, And then it was like, 1 or 2 o'clock when that happened, and my wife had purchased some fruit trees for us, some fruit trees that were supposed to arrive in the fall, in the late fall, and by the latest in December. And I used the tractor and I dug out all of these holes that we were going to plant the fruit trees in, and I loosened up the dirt so it would be a smooth transition. But it took so long to get the fruit trees, and they came when it's just really unpleasant and cold and not a good time to be outside and working and things like this. And yesterday was supposed to be the nicest day, and for a while it was supposed to be up in the 40s and above freezing, but it turned out it was a lot colder and it started to snow. And my wife sent me a video. She had watched it, and it was about what you were supposed to do with the tree if you didn't plant it in the ground. And we really didn't have the ability to do that. Like, I looked at the options, and the best option, the easiest option, was to just plant them and put them in the hole, right? And now my energy's kind of low. I didn't feel good. And I went outside, and it started to sleet. There's freezing rain and snow. And I'm now trying to get the tractor to get some dirt and some sand, some soil and some sand. We have some compost and some sand that I wanted to mix together, and they're all frozen solid, and I had to break it up with a shovel, and I had to remove the top layer. And I've had some problems with some, like, I don't know what to say, I don't want to call it a heart issue, but some issues with my heart in terms of like almost a regular heartbeat that happened after COVID, and it's come back and forth sometimes. So again, it's not like I've completely gotten over it, the COVID, having COVID. It's had some issues in my system. It has some after effects. And I was completely better during the summer. I had, there was no issues, but then I started to show some signs as winter kicked in, and I wasn't outside as much. It seemed to happen right around the election, which was weird. And so it's come and go, slight things, but my energy level has been down in these things. So I'm outside, and the snow's like pelting me in the face, and I'm driving the tractor, and like, particles of ice are hitting me in the eye. Like, it's like painful, and it starts to come down pretty hard. And now I'm getting out of breath, and I've got this like snowsuit on, and I'm tired, and it's physically hard, right? It's going to be colder. It's just going to get colder. There's going to be like no days above freezing for the next at least 2 weeks, it appears. So it's just a bad time. And so I go out and I start filling the holes, and I find the holes, everything else is frozen solid. But where I dug the holes, there's still a lot of loose dirt, wet dirt in there, soil, and I add soil to it, and I add some sand for drainage, because that's what you're supposed to do. And I'm, getting all this ready, and my wife comes out, and she cuts open the boxes and starts getting the trees out, and she's doing all this stuff, and she starts planting the trees. We're out there. I'm out there like 2.5 hours. And there were times I was getting out of breath, and my heart was beating a little fast. And so I just slowed down, right? I was like, all right, just, breathe and relax. And I was, I slowed down the amount I was shoveling out of the bucket or shoveling into the bucket or whatever I was doing in terms of moving the dirt. And I would just stand there for a little bit and then just relax and breathe and, calm down my heart rate and my breathing and all these things. And so, it's just something I had to like work through the process, something I wouldn't have to do a couple of years ago, right? It's just, mostly because of the post-COVID stuff, but also getting older and things. Certainly when I was younger, I could have just powered through it. But, I had to work the problem. We got the trees in. The trees look good, and I felt pretty good about having them done, right? Not having them just stored somewhere and then having to get them in the ground before, they start to bud out and all these things. And they're fruit trees, and someday we'll be eating fruit from them, my kids and things. Anyways, we had to come in, and I was going to make chili for dinner, and I already started. I use a sous vide. I'm going to make a video about sous vide at some point, because it's been something that we found just a great way to cook food. And I already started cooking some of the hamburger with sous vide, and, I was making this chili, but now I'm kind of wiped out, right? It's been a difficult day where I woke up and I wasn't feeling particularly great. And so I got through it, and, my wife and my daughter were there, and they helped me. It's an easy meal to make. But anyways, I was, just kind of wiped out. We ate dinner, and I was really tired. And once in a while, this thing happens where it's been happening to me for a couple of years, where if I overexert myself, my body sort of shorts out. And until I sleep, it's like I have to be rebooted in some way. It's kind of an odd thing. I don't really know how to describe it. It's happened a lot more since the COVID. And I didn't really have that. Like, I had maybe a mild version of that from, it was a a difficult thing to do. Like I said, it was inclement weather conditions, and it was a frustrating thing to plant the trees after a frustrating day of making a video. So this is why I didn't make a video yesterday. I could have made something last night, but I was so tired. I'm like, whatever. But anyways, we went to sleep, and I felt like 100% better. I feel great this morning. And I'm saying this because, like, sometimes in life things are difficult. They don't go as planned. In fact, there's always something. Like, there's always an issue with me making a video. There's always some frustration. And there's always some frustration with doing farm work. There's always something where nature does something or whatever it might be, right? I went out this morning and everything's frozen solid. Like all the snow we had and all the rain has turned into a sheet of ice, and the chicken door didn't open, and there's just issues. Like, there was just things this morning when I woke up in terms of farm stuff. There's always ways that nature seems to fight against you when you're doing farming. And people who have experienced this, lived on a farm, know what I'm talking about. There's always frustrations, but you just have to do what you have to do. You do your best, and you don't look at it being something that's like negative or hostile, like God's out to get you, or life is screwing you over, or whatever, ways that people have of making themselves a victim. You just go through them. You realize what you have to do. Like, I evaluated the situation. My wife and I talked about it. And it seemed like we had no other choice other than let the trees die, just keep them in a box or plant them. They had been there for a couple of days. You're supposed to take them out of the box right away. But they came when it was really bad weather and we were busy and things like this. And, we didn't have the ability to do anything with them. And we said, all right, a couple of days it's warm. The company screwed us over by not getting the trees to us in the fall when we were supposed to plant them. And so, you have to deal with that, right? I mean, the company didn't do their job, right? And so ultimately we had to pay on our end, and it's not necessarily fair when you think about it. And what happened with my video yesterday wasn't, part of it was my own stupidity that I could have rendered the thing, but instead I tried to fix a problem that the only way to fix it was to close Premiere Pro and open it back up. And that's, what I ended up doing. But I lost the whole video when I didn't have to. But I felt like there was a reason for it. I just was like, you know what? It wasn't meant to be. Like, some days you're just like, you got to fold, right? It wasn't meant to be. And I'll, probably include that information in the video. In other videos, I've already included some of it in this one. And with that, I'm going to start with this Marjorie Taylor Greene thing and then move on from there. So this is Marjorie Taylor Greene's Instagram page. Georgia 14's Congresswoman, wife and mother of three, successful businesswoman, save America and stop socialism. And it says here, the DC swamp and the fake news media are attacking me because I'm not one of them. I am one of you, and they hate me for it. Text message here. Sign your statement of support. Text message to 554444. And she believes that she has the power of the people behind her, which means pretty much nothing. Because Donald Trump had a lot of popularity and support. It meant nothing for him. Doesn't matter if you're dissatisfied. Doesn't matter how frustrated you are. And the swamp isn't going to be drained. And I'll get into that with Donald Trump because I want to talk about him as well. But the swamp is more of a swamp than ever. Donald Trump didn't do anything about it. Neither did she. So keep her Instagram posts in mind, because here she is got to knuckle under. And I'm going to go through this because it's important. I covered this in this video yesterday. A lot of these tactics that have been used by people on the right, people in the truth community, have played out, and we know they don't work. We now know they don't work, right? Because we've seen them not work time and time again.
Madam Speaker, my Democrat colleagues, Republican colleagues, my district back home in Georgia 14, to the American people, to my mom and dad, and my husband and my children. I've been here for 1 month and a day, and I've gotten to know part of my conference, my Republican colleagues, but not even all of them yet. I haven't gotten to know any of my Democrat colleagues, and I haven't had to have any conversations with any of you to tell you who I am and what I'm about. You only know me by how Media Matters, CNN, MSNBC, and the rest of the mainstream media is portraying me.
So when I originally took this clip, I'm now in the editing process. I didn't know where she was going with this. I'd seen some excerpts of this. But she's clearly trying to speak to America or her constituents or people like her. She's not talking to Congress, even though she's kind of talking to Congress. She sort of apologizes and sort of admits she was wrong. And I'll show you those clips in just a moment. I'll show you some of this thing. But the important piece to this is the problem with her, and you'll see this going forward, and this is a good example of something I've talked about for a number of years now, especially with the Cubies, is she claims that she was interested in QAnon for a little bit, and she got off Q, she quit QAnon, and, she's still into Donald Trump, and, don't judge her by her tweets that she made 2 years ago. And, whatever, that's a legitimate argument to some extent. But the problem is, and this is a big problem in the truth community, is that you're awake or you're sort of half awoken for 10 minutes. I mean, this happens with a lot of people. And you think you're ready to teach other people about truther narratives. I mean, this is a common mistake. People watch a video and they wake up a little bit and they start tweeting and going on social media. And in this case, she runs for Congress, going off half-cocked, and you're still in the kindergarten phase. If you're a QB, you haven't even become a truther yet. You're in preschool because you haven't even realized the one essential piece to it to start off being a truther, that it's a left-right paradigm, and politics is not a way to solve the problem. Politics is the problem. I mean, it's a big part of the problem. It's not something where you go to create a solution, and the media isn't somewhere where you go to create a solution either. She has become a voice for the so-called truth community, but she doesn't know what she's talking about. She's not a smart person. She's a gut person. She doesn't have a strong mind. She's very emotional, and she's gone off half-cocked, posting things on Twitter, harassing, that kid on video, and doing other things without really having a fundamental understanding of the problem and the potential solutions. Because as I talk about this here, there are a lot of these behaviors that have been tried in the truth community. There are a lot of things that have been tried that have become unsuccessful, right? We now know that those things aren't going to work. We now know which way the wind is blowing more than ever post Donald Trump, and I want to talk about Trump in this. And I knew these things weren't going to work, the protests and waking everybody up, and I talk about this going forward in this video. And this person doesn't know any of those things. She's relatively new to the so-called truth community. She isn't somebody who's gifted in her ability to express herself, which is a huge problem. And now she is being used to demonize all of us. And she's going up to Washington with this delusion that she's going to get a fair shake, that somehow the political system can be fixed, and the media is going to be fair, and it's not, right? And that you're going into their arena where you're going to get a severe beatdown. I mean, they own, the beast, and it's not just the Democrats, it's everybody. And Donald Trump wasn't the hero you thought he was, and Q is a joke. And so how about stepping back and learning and figuring out what's going on, and then coming up with a viable solution? Like I talk about spirituality so much, is to me the only reasonable solution of a system that's going to collapse no matter what. Before going up and, creating more censorship for everybody and making everybody in the truth community look stupid because they're using your inability to express yourself as a weapon against all of us.
And make the American people and the American taxpayers their focus. These are the things that I care about deeply. So when we elected President Trump, And then I started seeing things in the news that didn't make sense to me, like Russian collusion, which are conspiracy theories also, and have been proven so. These things bothered me deeply, and I realized just watching CNN or Fox News, I may not find the truth. And so what I did is I started looking up things on the internet, asking questions like most people do every day. Use Google. And I stumbled across something, and this was at the end of 2017, called QAnon. Well, these posts were mainly about this Russian collusion information. A lot of it was some of what I would see on the news at night, and I got very interested in it. So I posted about it on Facebook, I read about it, I talked about it, I asked questions about it, and then more information came from it. But you see, here's the problem. Throughout 2018, because I was upset about things and didn't trust the government really, because the people here weren't doing the things that I thought they should be doing for us, the things that I just told you I cared about. And I want you to know, a lot of Americans don't trust our government, and that's sad. The problem with that is, though, is I was allowed to believe things that weren't true, and I would ask questions about them and talk about them. And that is absolutely what I regret.
So this is validating what I've been saying forever. Don't get angry and post things, get emotional and post things on the internet. And you should know what you're doing and know what the nature of the internet is and know the nature of, what you could call the game here before you start posting things and then run for Congress. Like, she hasn't worked any of these things out, but she wants to do something. You understand this? She doesn't get it. Like, she fell for Q, and she believed in some things that were true and some things that were not true, and she posted emotional posts about these things and made some actions, and then she decided to run for Congress, not realizing that all these things that she had posted were going to be held against her. I've said this over and over again. Don't drunk dial on the internet. The internet is forever, and it's going to be used against you. And if you're going to post things on the internet, understand that it isn't going to change anything. That the system is collapsing because it's God's will. It's time for the system to go. It's far more comprehensive than she knows. Like, she doesn't understand. Like, she's, in nursery school in this thing. But she wants to be a change agent without really understanding what needs to be changed and what can be changed and how you change something. The only way you can really change this is from purifying yourself internally and manifesting a better world, which is what I prefaced this video with. And I've talked about that forever. That only spirituality, only connecting to God internally and purifying your internal system, can you then help create a better system from the inside out. That's the only solution. These other ways of trying to solve the problem by doing things in the material world, posting things on the internet, and, attacking people and trolling people and throwing, crap at people doesn't work. And so, her explanation here isn't going to sit well with Democrats, but why are you trying to explain yourself to the Democrats? Why are you explaining yourself to them? Because you think that you're going to change things politically. And you're not. It's going to change you. You're getting sucked into the swamp. You've dove into the swamp, and now you're bowing before the slimy creatures, the alligators and the water moccasins and the, whatever things that are in the swamp, right? Undesirable things in the swamp. You're now trying to explain yourself to the swamp creatures. Like she's Madam Speaker. Like, why would you ever want to explain yourself to Madam Pelosi? Why would you ever have to walk back what you believe to Madam Pelosi? Because you're going about this in the wrong direction and you don't get it, right? You don't understand that this is just going to have a negative effect, and you're hurting the rest of us with your behavior and actions. All the QBs are. That all the people that dove into the Q thing instead of going for the real truth. Like, some people got deeper levels of truth and some people found Q, right? And there's a difference in the level of consciousness of the people. Because somebody who could do real research and use critical thinking skills would have saw through the whole Q thing from the beginning.
As if it weren't for the Facebook post and comments that I liked in 2018, I wouldn't be standing here today, and you couldn't point a finger and accuse me of anything wrong, because I've lived a very good life that I'm proud of, my family's proud of, my husband's proud of, my children are proud of, and that's what my district elected me for. So later in 2018, when I started finding misinformation, lies, things that were not true in these QAnon posts, I stopped believing it. And I want to tell you, any source, and I say this to everyone, any source of information that is a mix of truth and a mix of lies is dangerous, no matter what it is saying, what party it is helping, anything or any country it's about. It's dangerous. And these are the things that happen on the left and the right. And it is a true problem in our country. So I walked away from those things, and I decided I'm going to do what I've done all my life. I'm going to work hard and try to solve the problems that I'm upset about. So I started getting involved in politics.
So this is a person who made some money. She said she's a successful businesswoman. They have a family business, and she has money. And she was upset by stuff she was reading on the internet, QB stuff, emotionally upset. Again, in a state of emotions, right? Not in a state of feeling, which is a deeper level, a heart level thing, and a mind level thing, which is, something that's mental. You understand this. I've talked about this in the past. You have 3 centers of intelligence. You have your stomach level, your gut level intelligence. There's your solar plexus. There's spiritual points there. There's your reproductive point. There's your stomach gut point. And then you have a nerve center there that has all these nerve endings. So it's a level of intelligence. It's where you experience lower level emotions like fear, like anger and hatred, pleasure and things like this. When you're upset, you get stomach aches and things. And so this is one level of intelligence. And some people are sort of centered in their gut. And then there's mental people who have mental levels of intelligence, brainiacs, people who are, smart IQ-wise, they have high IQs, but they don't have common sense, right? Your instincts and things are related to your gut. Like my 2 dogs, right? When you go outside with your dogs, they sniff around and they'll smell things. And, my dogs are Papillons, they got big ears and whatever. And so they have a heightened level of sensory intelligence, right? Their senses are more impactful in their intelligence, in their ability to process information. Like they'll smell something and it'll trigger things in their brains, and they'll understand what's been going on, in various areas in the yard, or if you go for a walk on a trail or something. Animals can pick up what's going on in the environment in ways that humans can't. And they have very gut level, right? This is the gut level stuff in a person, a human being. And then you have your mental faculties, and you have a lot of people who are intellectual, and they're very cerebral, and they're scientific. They're smart, but they don't have any common sense. They don't have any, instincts. They're disconnected from their gut. And then there's the heart. The heart is this wonderful developed organ that is there to process your experience, your spiritual experience, and it's the gateway to interact with God and your soul. And that's where your deeper level feelings are, your love, your compassion, all these types of things. And through the instrument of your heart, the intelligence of your heart, God and your soul can help you process information, understand information on a soul level. And so ideally, you would have a working relationship with all 3 of these intelligence centers. But this woman has, she's a gut person. You can just see it. She doesn't have a well-developed mind, and she doesn't have, her heart isn't developed in a way like I'm talking about. She might feel love and things. I'm sure she does, but she's not using it as a interactive organ, interactive intelligence center with God and these things. She's mostly reacting on a lower level emotion, fear and anger and things. You can see this in her actions. And she has a limited knowledge and understanding of these truther narratives. And she's a doer, right? She is what she said, a fighter, right? She's a worker and a fighter. You can see it. She's somebody who wants to get involved, but she's not ready. She doesn't understand the problem yet. And she doesn't know a lot of the things that she's trying to do here have shown, we've seen them over and over again, to have failed, right? She's trying to fix the beast by diving into the swamp and then trying to work with swamp creatures to clean the swamp, right? It's just not possible.
You see, school shootings are absolutely real. And every child that is lost, those families mourn it. I understand how terrible it is because when I was 16 years old in 11th grade, my school was a gun-free school zone, and one of my schoolmates brought guns to school and took our entire school hostage. And that happened right down the hall from my classroom. I know the fear that David Hogg had that day. I know the fear that these kids have. And this is why, and I say this sincerely with all my heart, because I love our kids, every single one of your children, all of our children. I truly believe that children at school should never be left unprotected. I believe they should be just as protected as we were with 30,000 National Guardsmen. Our children are our future, and they're our most precious resource.
So the reason why she's saying this is a video resurfaced, and I covered this in this other video that I deleted, but what happened was she went to some place to confront David Hogg. She must have been stalking him on the internet, and she figured out where he was going to be, and as a grown-ass woman, she comes behind him. Somebody else is recording her with their phone, and she starts harassing him, right? And there's a couple other people with him, and she's just belittling him, nagging him and confronting him, and it looks bad. And these emotionally harassing behaviors do not work. We should all recognize that now. So this is Alex Jones stuff, where Alex Jones used to get on a megaphone, and he would show up at a place, and he would scream over, he'd be at some public event, and he'd confront people, yelling at them on a megaphone, or get in their face and confront them when they were walking. And then all these other various YouTube channels and other people started following suit, and it became this behavior. A lot of them were shills and disinformation agents, and they would show up and confront. They would show up with a camera and do this like vigilante journalism and harass celebrities and politicians. There's this video, this guy, Buzz Aldrin, the Freemason, right, astronaut, and some guy confronts him, and Buzz Aldrin's like 80 years old, and the guy gets in his face, and he wants him to swear in a Bible, and Buzz Aldrin punches the guy. I mean, it's just horrible stuff, right? It doesn't work. Harassing people doesn't work, and that includes harassing people on the internet, going to celebrities' Instagram pages and leaving comments and harassing them and all these things. It's backfired. It's made the truth community look like emotionally unstable and even possibly violent people. Making threats, saying anything in a hostile way doesn't work. You look irrational, you look stupid, you make all of us look stupid and irrational, and it always backfires. It's a proven fail, right? It's been tried over and over again, and it doesn't work. And she engaged in this behavior, and the video resurfaced. It doesn't matter. She's changed. It doesn't matter. She's saying these things happened 2 years ago. It doesn't matter. Like, it matters that you did them, and now you're in public office and it's being used against you by a dishonest media. And it means you're not ready to go out, right? You're not ready. You haven't figured out what works and doesn't work. You haven't figured out the real problems, and you haven't certainly figured out a solution. And you're just like really upset, and you're going in drunk dialing on the internet and harassing people. I say this over and over again. It does not work. Bullying people on the internet does not work. The Cubies, made a living doing this. It made everybody hate the Cubies. And I've talked about this over and over again. How many of you have a story of an unpleasant interaction with a Cubie? And this woman is now being, used as the face of the so-called truth community. Like they're trying to demonize all of us by association. Let me show you a little bit of the video I made. I have some of the clips left yesterday. And this is, I talked about this in this video. Saturday Night Live, for the past 4 years, their cold open featured Donald Trump, featured Alec Baldwin. Pretty much every weekly episode, the cold open was something to do with Donald Trump. I think, maybe only a few weeks out of the last 4 years that they didn't open with Donald Trump. And now Donald Trump is gone. Alec Baldwin is, retired his ducky lips. And so what do they do, right? What do they do that now that Trump is gone? Well, this week they opened with Marjorie Taylor Greene.
Well, first off, I believe the Parkland shooting was a hoax. The teachers were actors and the children were dolls. I believe 9/11 was a hoax. Did anyone actually see it happen?
And so they're not only demonizing Marjorie Taylor Greene, but they're demonizing anybody who believes in these so-called theories. And yesterday they had a hearing led by the Democrats. One of my friends on Facebook sent this to me.
The first reason is that we have never had a member like this before. She has encouraged violence against members of this institution, going so far as agreeing with a comment that advocated for putting a bullet in the head of the Speaker of the House of Representatives. That was part of a larger pattern of endorsing violence. This is truly sick stuff. Congresswoman Greene has also promoted truly appalling things, from implying that 9/11 is a hoax, saying school shootings were false flag operations.
So you see the same talking points on Saturday Night Live. The same message is being sent out by Congress in these hearings. Marjorie Taylor Greene being the new so-called face of the truth community. She's the new Alex Jones, the new Trump. She's the new person they're demonizing. They're using as a weapon against people who get their media elsewhere, that don't buy into the official story or the mainstream media. And here's another woman that does the same thing.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Listening to our witnesses and the members of this committee, all I can think about is what a terribly sad day this is for our country and for Congress. But we don't have a choice but to deal with this. Historically, the parties have policed themselves. Even as recently as a couple years ago, our Republican colleagues removed a member from committees after he made a series of false and despicable statements. But that was the old GOP. Now, when a member of the House Republican caucus advocates for insurrection, violence against elected officials and children, or promotes fringe conspiracy theories, apparently the Republican Party embraces that member and assigns her to committees where her unhinged beliefs can do the most harm. For apparently the party of limited government and fiscal responsibility, free markets, and peace through strength has become the party.
See, she's reading these statements, right? And, listen to what she's saying here, because this is, they're advocating for deplatforming and maybe even arresting. Just kicking you out of society if you believe in these theories. This is where we are right now. You guys should all be aware of this. This is the movement that's afoot, where you're being treated like communists used to be treated. You're a danger to the state. And anybody who believes in these things needs to be controlled in some way. Think about where this could lead. Like, you're going to end up in FEMA camps in 2 years if this continues to snowball. And this Marjorie Taylor Greene is another Judas goat. And I'll get to her, some of her things that she said and did.
Party of conspiracy theories and QAnon. And that's not my assessment. That's a direct quote from Republican Senator John Thune of South Dakota. A Republican Party that endorses the violence and conspiracy theories espoused by the representative from Georgia is not our parents' Republican Party. It's not Ronald Reagan's GOP or the Bush's GOP. And if today's House Republican caucus wants to embrace this behavior, the majority does not.
Again, demonizing anybody who subscribes to conspiracy theories. Some of these things, it's over 50%. But do you think most people are going to want to, admit to these things now? The way this thing has been played out, right? See, she is a win. Marjorie Taylor Greene is a win for these, Democratic officials and their handlers and the intelligence community, and certainly the media, MSNBC and CNN and ABC News and NBC News and CBS News. They all want to demonize people who are not listening to their programming. So if you're getting your news, if you're getting your beliefs from social media, they want to control that, right? They're already doing that. And if you're believing things that aren't fed to you by the mainstream media and by the government, you are now dangerous. You are a potential domestic terrorist. I mean, they've done this over and over again. They're clearly saying this. And Marjorie Taylor Greene is the face of this thing right now, and they want to have other people be the face of it. And so it's time to, like, realize, especially because of the Q movement, the damage that the Qs have done, because they are feeding crazy to a profile that's being created of anybody who believes anything other than the official story, anything other than the news media feeds to you. If you believe those things, then you're associated with QAnon. QAnon is defining for everybody else. That's what they're trying to do right now. They're working this profile and narrative, and it's working for them. And this is how she's being used by Nightmare Network CNN. This is how they're playing her stuff, right? It's very, very important here.
Rhetoric like this from Marjorie Taylor Greene in 2019 that's just coming to light. Will they embrace this? What's seen in this video, uncovered by Twitter user Zedster?
Zedster broke this story. You got to look out for Zedster. That's great. It's even more hilarious. I just did a video 2 days ago on my apocalaughsnow channel talking about how CNN ran this hit piece on this former QB. And the point of the hit piece was, if you get your news from Twitter and YouTube and Facebook, you're going to end up like this QB, right? You have to go to official sites like CNN. But now you know the truth that CNN needs Zedster to break their news for them. Like, they're going to social media, they're going to Twitter, and having people break stories for them and do their research for them.
Will they embrace this? What's seen in this video, uncovered by Twitter user Zedster?
If we have a sea of people, if we shut down the streets, if we shut down everything, if we flood the Capitol building, flood all the government buildings, go inside. These are public buildings. We own them. We own these buildings. Do you understand that? We own the buildings and we pay all the people that work in the buildings.
So, she's just appalled. It's so horrible. They need this, right? They need this to survive. The mainstream media is parasitic, and they don't bring any energy. They don't bring anything that's exciting and things like this. But they got her on tape 2 years before the Capitol Hill debacle, saying go inside the buildings and flood the buildings with people, which is what happened, and it was a disaster. Because QBs don't get it. They don't understand the game. They don't understand how they're being profiled. They don't understand, how they're being worked. I'm not sure if this is a regular shill that she's controlled opposition. She's, COINTELPRO, Marjorie Taylor Greene. If she's, controlled, or she's just a volunteer dummy, right? It's always better for them to have volunteers. It's always better for them to have people who believe in what they're saying instead of actors, people who are playing a role. And so when people say, well, that person's a shill, well, I'm like, yeah, but probably not. Because more often than not, they just want volunteers, and it's easy for them to get crazy and stupid people in America. It's easy for them to enlist dummies who do their bidding. They just give them a little power, they just give them a platform, and they let them talk. That's all you have to do. There's plenty of volunteer dummies out there. You don't need to, put in an actor or somebody that you might get caught that's an agent, provocateur, or whatever. You just need the regular dummy who believes in what they're saying, and there's lots of them, especially in the Q movement. So I'm in the editing process, and I realized I left this important point out. And I've talked about this in past videos, that there's certain personality disorders where people are always triangulating, that the personality type, the dysfunctional personality type, they will engage in this behavior where they can triangulate between two people. And so, like, it's your boss at work, for example. And then they'll go to you and say, the boss is mistreating you. The boss said this behind your back. Your boss said that. And they know how you're going to react. And they have your trust. And then you say something. And then they go to the boss and say, Johnny just said this. And, and they'll make it worse. They'll sensationalize it and they'll embellish. And they're the crazy one. They're the person creating the conflict. But they make the other two people fight. You end up getting fired or getting demoted, or they get promoted over you. Or it could be in a social situation where you have, one friend that triangulates between two friends or two people in a family, and they know how you're going to react. They know if they say certain things that you're going to get angry, you're going to act out with the other person, you're going to display these behaviors. A better example, a more specific example, like they'll say to your boss, Johnny's been drinking a lot. Johnny's been hitting the sauce at work, at lunch or whatever, and then the person takes Johnny out, right? The inciter takes Johnny out and makes sure he has a couple of drinks at lunch in a day where Johnny has to meet with the boss. And he comes in, the boss can smell alcohol, right? And so it's a way of setting somebody up. Usually it involves riling the person up and making them angry. There's a movie, not a great movie, but it's a great movie in terms of displaying this type of behavior. There is a guy and he goes with his boss and he says to his boss, "Do you ever want to just do something like sick and twisted?" I don't remember the name of the movie. And his boss is kind of a little guy, and this guy's, a more sort of leading man type. And he gets his boss worked up. He said, "You ever want to just do something antisocial?" He said, "Why don't we each go up to this girl?" And the girl's like some girl at work who has some kind of hearing problem, and she, doesn't speak very well. And he says, "Let's go both pretend that we're in love with this girl, and then we'll just dump her, right? We'll just crap all over, like some kind of frat boy." But this is at like a high level business. And they both do it, and the boss falls in love with the girl, but the girl falls in love with a sociopath, the dude with the personality disorder, and he breaks her heart. The other guy, begs her to take him, and he loses it, and he ends up getting demoted, right? And the other guy gets promoted, the sociopath. And it's a hard movie to get through, but it's an example of this. And so what the people who control the system, they know what Trump was going to do. Like they figure out, for example, if they got the QBs and Trump to believe that the election was rigged. They put all this information out, narrative, and then they close it down and they, don't allow it to go forward. There's no investigation. And Trump is going to work up his base and get his base going, right? They know how the base is going to react. Again, they can put in a few agent provocateurs or whatever. The next thing you know, you have the Capitol building, right? You have the Capitol building thing. And so what they have is they figure out what's going to work you up and how to control your behavior and how to get you react. And at the same time, or before this, for a number of years, they're talking about how Trump supporters and QBs are these deranged, unhinged, mentally ill conspiracy theorists. So they're working the public. They're, the news media and all these people are telling you all the time how messed up Trump supporters are and how messed up Trump is and how crazy they all are. And so then they create this circumstances for these, people to act out the way they did on Capitol Hill. And then they say, "Look, see, we told you, we got to do something about this. You guys are going to have to give up some of your rights and your ability to express yourselves on the internet. And you're all going to have to go to CNN and Fox and MSNBC to get your news because it's not safe for you to go out on the internet anymore and learn these things because people don't know how to handle it when you give them this kind of information." It's the same kind of stuff. I've been talking about this obscurantism, in terms of the whispers from the brighter world messages from the Heartfulness system, and how this plays out when you watch TV shows and movies and things. I've just been covering this in multiple videos, where the government has a cover story and they don't level with the American people and they never tell them the truth and they can't handle the truth. And if you tell the people the truth, they'll panic and they'll go, crazy, and they'll start acting out and all these things. And so their media has to be controlled and their messaging has to be controlled. If you just let people run around making up their own news or researching their own news, you're going to have these types of acting out behaviors. You understand this? And Marjorie Taylor Greene, or Marjorie Greene, I guess is how she goes by, is a perfect example of this, right? She is the poster child where she's been worked up and she's been QB'd and she's been trumped and she doesn't have the, mental capacity to figure out she's being, played and all these things. And she just completely believes in this rhetoric and she's going to act out on social media. Then all of a sudden she's elected to Congress and they now have somebody that can look at this person, look at all the things she said. And then they tie her to the Capitol Hill and they tie QBs to all these things. And then they try to tie it to the rest of us who don't believe in the mainstream narratives. And so it is a profile they're creating and they're working you so you fit into the profile, and then they sell the profile, and then they implement new rules and laws and, all these things that you've been worried about them doing, right? This was the whole reason for acting out, because you don't want them, they're not going to take away my freedoms, and then you do something so they take away your freedoms, right? You do things so they take away your rights because you're an unknowing asset to the, to what you would call the deep state, and you're being worked and played so they can make all of your nightmares come true.
National Guardsmen. Our children are our future, and they're our most precious resource. I also want to tell you 9/11 absolutely happened. I remember that day crying all day long watching it on the news. And it's a tragedy for anyone to say it didn't happen. And so that I definitely want to tell you, I do not believe that it's fake. I also want to tell you that we've got to do better. You see, big media companies can take teeny tiny pieces of words that I've said, that you have said, any of us, and can portray us into someone that we're not. And that is wrong. Cancel culture is a real thing. It is.
Okay, so I'm going to stop there. This video is getting really long. I made a voiceover for the video yesterday, so I'm going to include that at the end of the video here and just tack it on. I think it pertains to what I'm saying here. This video is getting long, and it's getting late again. I want to get this up on the internets. But what she's saying here, she talks about her religion and being a Christian, being a part of, sort of old-fashioned values, and she talked about how she looked up to Donald Trump, who everyone should know he displayed himself. And I was going to cover this. I got this stuff with John Kerry, and I'll do that tomorrow, hopefully, and I'll get into the Trump stuff. But all these things have been fleshed out, right? We kind of know which way the wind's blowing. We know that the movement is being run through the liberal Democrats, the liberal wing of the two-party system, the left-right paradigm. The right is also controlled. But right now they're giving the powers to the left, and they're using Trump and his supporters as an excuse to take away things, take away your liberties, take away your freedoms, say that you're not qualified to vote and pick your own leadership, you're mentally ill, you're unevolved, right? You're racist, you're, some sort of horrible person. And this Marjorie Taylor Greene is fitting that profile, and they're using her own words against her, her own actions against her, and the cancel culture is here. Now, when I was a kid, I think she probably must be in her 40s or 50s, but it used to be people like her were in charge of cancel culture. It used to be the Christian Coalition and the moral majority that would go to sponsors, would go to businesses and say, pull your sponsorship or we're going to boycott you. They would speak out against various types of, things that they thought were immoral, things that they thought weren't correct, and they were able to suppress and censor people. It used to be people on the right, the Republicans, the Christian Coalition. There used to be power on the right, a lot more power on the right than the left, and they were able to stifle a lot of these different movements. Some of the movements were positive, so not all the movements were bad, but the power was on the right to censor people. There was the communist witch hunt in America where they were going after people who were communists and socialists, McCarthy, right, McCarthyism, and it was pretty bad, right? They were able to destroy people that weren't even really communists, people who were just, they had a loose association or whatever it is. And that all came from the right and from Christians, and women and people like this Marjorie Taylor Greene. And so now the tides have turned, and you have to recognize that. You have to recognize what's working and what isn't, and you have to move beyond the right and the left. You have to, if this person isn't ready to educate people and work and be a part of the solution, because she doesn't understand the problem. She still thinks the right is superior to the left, and she's still bought into that way of thinking, as many of you are, right? She still thinks Trump is the savior, and she certainly doesn't have a solution. And so here's this voiceover. I'll end this video with that. I put this voiceover together for the video yesterday, and I'll get to these other things hopefully tomorrow. And so here it is. So I often talk about internal worlds, what people have inside. And the powers that be, one of the ways that they've used people's social media expression, and this goes across the board, is to find out what's going on inside of people. It's a big deal. They want to get into your inner workings. They want to know what's going on, and they want to be able to use it against you in one way or another. Now, we've seen this, of course, with advertising. You search for something, or you post about something on Facebook or something, and next thing you know, you got all these ads, and you're being marketed to. And so that's one way. In terms of recommending, they want to keep you watching more videos on YouTube, for example, or Facebook in terms of Facebook posts, so they know how to recommend things to you to keep you engaged on, one social media platform or another. Ultimately, it was going to be used to define you, as some profile had been created for you, about you, by yourself. Like you volunteered some of the worst things, the most damning things about your inside world, and you just let them fly. I've talked about over and over again, imagine someday that you're sitting outside of a FEMA camp or something like it, and there is a bureaucrat sitting with an iPad with a list of your worst social media posts, and you have to explain yourself, right? And some, big thing is writing on the line. I mean, who knows if that could happen, but you should look at it that way, because we've already seen this. There's the quarterback now for the Arizona Cardinals, Kyler Murray. When he won the Heisman Trophy, they went back to when he was 15 years old, and he was, talking smack to some of his friends, and he used some, homophobic slurs, and he was confronted with this as a college athlete. Another was a baseball pitcher that said some racial slurs when he was a teenager, and then he was in the World Series or something like that. And now you have Marjorie Taylor Greene, who was just a QB and whatever she was, right? She was out there on her own doing QB stuff, and nobody really cared. But then she gained a national political office, and it was a post-Trump era where they needed somebody else to fill Trump's shoes, at least temporarily. And now they're bringing out all of this stuff. They're finding all these posts and things, and they're demonizing her. And anybody else who believes in conspiracy theories, in air quotes, right? Anybody who doesn't accept the official story is being viewed as a Marjorie Taylor Greene, a Alex Jones, Donald Trump a little bit, right? And so this is how it's going to go, how far it's going to go. Where is this going to end up? Where does it stop, right? At what, point do you lose more and more of your rights and civil liberties? All these things that she thinks she's fighting for, and she's just a shill, either willingly or unwillingly, volunteer to be some sort of QB dummy out there, saying QB dummy things, and then being the poster child for why she and other people like her who believe what she believes are a threat to the common good and to the system, the beast, and have to be controlled in one way or another. And how far does that control go? I mean, they're pushing for this right now. And like I said, you just have to sit back. If you're a Republican, and again, I'm not one, but if you're a Republican, because if you don't move, she hasn't moved her consciousness to understand the left-right paradigm. So she's not even a truther. She's not on the level of a truther, which isn't some extraordinary feat, right? It isn't like you're necessarily cream of the crop because you wake up a little bit and you're a truther, and she's not even on that level. Like she's preschool or kindergarten, and she's out there blabbing and doing stupid stuff and chasing David Hogg around the street. And, she's just a nightmare. And she's got this platform now. She's somebody with a high governmental position. She's out there. And it demonized all the people who voted for her. Since Trump, they've been pushing this idea that people are too stupid to vote. That's a big, thing that's going on there. That the American people can't be left to decide who their leaders are because they're too emotional, they're too, mentally unbalanced. And so by exposing your internal world and the worst of it and making bad decisions on social media, you're just handing over, you're just trying yourself, right? You're convicting yourself through one tweet at a time. Trump did this, and that's why I say you got to think before you post things. You got to say things in a reasonable and rational way. Because, saying these things, if you're a dope, if you're an emotionally based person, you are actually, hurting your so-called movement. Because you're not qualified based in your low-level consciousness and your low-level vibration to present this information. You have to be somebody who can sound reasonable and rational and can explain these things. I've talked about this before. There's gut people, gut-level intelligence, and that's people who are emotionally based, anger, hatred, fear, whatever it is. Their desires are ruling their world, their gut-level stuff. There's all these nerve endings, and there's a chakra, a power point there, a couple of power points, your reproductive point, your gut point, which is where your appetites are in these things, your root chakra, your base chakra, where the kundalini is, and all these things. That are your lower level, animalistic, base level type of, instinctual consciousness, right? So this is your lower level type of immature level, emotional level, intelligence center. It's where you can process and, understand the world through your gut, and where people have all these, emotions, and they get angry, they get fearful, and they go and they post things, and they think they know things, but they're not seeing things clearly because their emotions are clouding their view. And that's Marjorie Taylor Greene. And then you have mental people who are cerebral, who can analyze things with their mind, and that is, people on the left a little bit more. There are also emotional people on the left, obviously, and there's people on the right that have the ability to do this, but it's scientific people, and that's another level of intelligence. Of course, your mind, your brain, and then you have your heart-based intelligence, which is where you're connected to God in your soul. And this is your higher level feelings as opposed to your lower level emotions of love and compassion and these things. And you see things and you feel things on a different level with your heart. And it's more refined, right? It's something where it's more developed and God is there with you. God is providing you with the information and the interpretation. And so there's a, more accuracy there. When you're able to use your heart, that's the Heartfulness Meditation that I do. And so it helps people to develop their heart as an instrument of intelligence. But you still have to use your brain, and your gut has to be, kept in balance, but it's also a tool of intelligence, your instinctual level. You can see, when my dogs go around the yard, or we're going for a walk, and they're sniffing everywhere. And their ears are up, they got big ears, papillons. And so they have heightened senses. And they can gather all kinds of information just by smelling things. It triggers all kinds of information in their brains. And this is all gut level stuff, right? Instincts are good, but human beings, their guts are often out of whack. People's guts are all messed up and filled with fear and hatred and low vibrational stuff. And those people, a lot of those people make up the Q movement. They don't have the capacity for analytical and critical thinking type of behaviors. They're very emotional, and these things. And that's what's being presented by the so-called left and social media and regular media, that low vibrational people, low consciousness people, are believing in these unfounded conspiracy theories. And they're making, a general wide sweeping assessment of everybody who's doing this, and they're using it as a weapon against all of us. And a threat, right? A threat of potential disenfranchisement and being marginalized. And more people are like, I don't want to be associated with Marjorie Taylor Greene. I don't want to say that I believe these things. And so they have this, face of this thing, right? This is the face of it. Donald Trump flirted with some of these truther narratives just to win people over because he was scamming them, right? He's a salesman. But they have these faces, Alex Jones, and they want to create this profile. And when you feed into this profile, you might be all outraged and angry, but you got to think about what you're doing and how it's going to affect the overall movement. Because Marjorie Taylor Greene's consciousness, if she's, not a shill, she could be, who knows. But if this is, her actual beliefs and her actual ability to reason, she's a kindergartner in the truth community, right? She's barely getting it. And she's out there, blabbing and nagging people and being hostile and all these things and presenting information when she isn't ready. I talked about this with Roseanne and some of these celebrities that, remember when Roseanne became a truther for a little bit and then she flipped out on YouTube and everyone realized she was batshit crazy, right? That was kind of funny, but she did damage and all these people immediately flocked to her because she was a celebrity. This happens quite often when people are, General Flynn, he's another disaster, nightmare, Sidney Powell and that guy, Lynn Woods, and they're, sort of famous people, but they're just not qualified. They haven't reached the level, the threshold of understanding what's going on, and they're just being used, and they say things that are not true. And they don't present things in a reasonable way that people can see that you're not some unhinged right-wing nut person that's a QB, that you have a more global perspective, and you can explain things in a way that's rational and reasonable. You can do it in a calm way. You can do it with some level of, subtle vibrations and things where people connect to your energy and your consciousness and they're not triggered. And anybody who's not able to reach that level shouldn't be out there, just blabbing and doing stupid stuff because you can see what's happening now. Like you can see the way that they're moving this thing. Now I have, in my lifetime, I've done 2 different jobs, or really 3 different jobs, where I have assessed people's internal worlds. So I am, a trained counselor. I have a master's degree in counseling, and I did psychological assessments where people take psychological tests and, you sit down and do an interview with them, and you have to figure out what's going on inside of them. The psychological tests are, they provide information and clues inside somebody's internal world. When I was, in my graduate school, there was a master in counseling program and a master's in art therapy. And art therapy is a good way to figure out what's going on inside of people. Because when people come to a counselor, a psychologist, or whatever it is, and again, there's a reason I don't do that work anymore. Like I've said, it's all about pathologizing people and looking at what's wrong with them instead of embracing their health, embracing what's best about them, which is the heartfulness system. The heartfulness system is to pull out somebody's essence in their soul and bring out their higher nature. That's what the system does. And so it's a much better system for me, right? It's a much more positive system than it's a solution-based system as opposed to a problem-based system. But the psychological methods are very good at understanding what's going on inside people because most people don't know. They go to a counselor and a therapist. They don't know what's going on inside of them. They're confused and they're too tight and they're not, introverted. They're not introspective. And so they don't really know what's going on inside of them. And so then when I was a heartfulness trainer and I used to give sittings, it was a volunteer position, but it was still something that's, work. And you sit down, you transmit to people, and you read their internal condition on a spiritual level. And so there's been, I've had training of 2 different ways of looking at people or looking into people's internal worlds. And I've just been good at it in terms of being, somebody who's dyslexic and sees patterns, but also being an introvert, and then just knowing what's going on inside of myself and understanding that with other people, right? How my inner workings work. If you're introspective and reflective, you kind of get a sense of how other people's internal worlds work as well. And most people hide themselves to one extent or another. They don't reveal what's really going on inside themselves, Most people are afraid to expose, the good part of themselves, the soul part. They're afraid to expose their hearts and open up to who they could be, right? There's just this fear of the divinity within everybody. They fear their own divinity. That's just human nature, which is a, real bummer. But on the other side of the coin, people are scared of exposing the dark things that are inside of them, the things that embarrass them. But with social media, people end up doing that. Like, it's weird because people are doing it in private. Like, they're posting things where they're secure in their homes and they're by themselves. And they post things and they open up. And even though they're opening it up to the world and they're revealing things they don't want people really to see or hear that might come back to haunt them later, they do it because they're in a comfort zone, especially if they, smoke some pot or they drink some alcohol or they're on some pain medication or something, or they're really angry and triggered about something. They need to vent and they don't have any people to talk to. So they just unload it on social media thinking that they're unloading it to a group or people like them. But everybody can see it and it can be recorded and it can be used as a weapon against you later on. Even years in the future. Even if you've changed your position, you're an entirely different person. You have these things that you said when you were a teenager, and they're going to use them, and they won't, they won't be afraid to use them in some dystopian world in the future. And so everyone has to realize this, because what happened on Capitol Hill, and regardless of whether you think it was completely controlled, it was actors, whatever your theory is, doesn't matter. Like, that just doesn't matter. Those details aren't important. It's the excuse they're using, because there's victimization here. There always has to be a victim statement. And there's people who are, victims. The lawmakers, the Nancy Pelosi, the Dems on Capitol Hill are crying victim, crying foul. And the government, all these people. Look at these, crazy people attacking our safe space or whatever, AOC and all these people. And so we have to do things. We have to control these people so they don't do these things in the future. And they're going to impose more restrictions. They're already doing it on social media. They're preventing people from being able to express themselves. And, they're going to do it in other places. And they're going to probably be more events and things like this. And so you got to realize it's not working. It's for them. Marjorie Taylor Greene is a, complete gift to the left and the media and social media and all these people who want to restrict you or control you. She is a weapon being used against you. And you should be able to see that. This type of behavior doesn't produce results that help your belief system and your movement. It hurts it. It hurts all of us. And people have to understand that right now more than ever, because things are getting real. If you just back off and you just sit back and watch the show, the Democrats are sitting on horrible cards. Like, if this was poker or whatever, you just call their bluff. You sit back. You don't do anything. You don't feed them things, right? You don't feed them information. You don't give them what they need. And I'm not, anti-Democrat. I'm not pro-Republican. I'm just saying for these Republican people that find their way into this, video, you just sit back and you watch Joe Biden, who's sitting on a mountain of debt and, all these bad decisions and no real answers. And you watch the Democrats fight amongst themselves as the extreme left of the Democratic Party starts to want to get their, their share of the pie, because they, help support this, whatever it is that happened up there, right? And so they will implode. But right now, by just acting out and being stupid, you should realize when you just got your ass handed to you and Trump played you and Q played you and you just, you didn't know what you were doing and you're kind of a dummy and you just got worked and you sit back and you shut the up, right? Because, you didn't know what you were doing, right? You jumped into something before you were ready to talk, right? Before you were, made into somebody who could express things in a higher level and be a good example of this consciousness, of this conscious movement, that the government and the people that control the system are aware that is, a threat to their well-being in the system itself. And then, like I said over and over again, the system's going to collapse on its own. You don't have to do anything. It's already been done on the divine level, right? The work has been done on the divine level. The system has to come down. It's time. It's run its course. The Kali Yuga is coming to an end. You don't have to do anything. You just have to prepare for what's next. Like, you don't have to do anything to fight this system and bring it down. You know, there doesn't need to be a revolution or an uprising and all these stupid ideas that are out there. That's already going to happen on its own. The system is literally collapsing in front of your eyes. We're watching it collapse. What are you going to do afterwards? And what's the world going to be like when it collapses? That's what's important. And you don't want to lose things. You don't want to lose, things that you might need post-collapse. Like, they're taking things away that might be essential in a chaotic period post-collapse where you're going to need things. You're going to need things to help you get through that system, material things, and they're trying to take those things away from you, and you're helping them by being a dope and acting out and, claiming it's the end of the world when the end of the world is happening, but it's not because of the Democrats in the system. It's happening because of God. The end of, not the end of the world, but the end of the beast is happening. And so, you calm down and you just accept what's going on as being from God. You sit back, you watch the show, you enjoy yourself, and you prepare for what's next. You prepare your kids for what's next. And the biggest piece to this is connect to God internally and rise up to a higher level of consciousness. Because only people that are connected to God in a deeper way will be able to exist and thrive in the world the way it's going to be in the future. Right now, you can be a sociopath and become a trillionaire or a billionaire. You can be a bad person and succeed in this world because it's a Kali Yuga, it's a low vibrational time. But in the future, you won't be able to exist with these types of tendencies. If you're a selfish, narcissistic, evil person, you won't be able, your vibrations and your low-level consciousness will be, it'll feel like you're under attack because it'll be a much more refined spiritual time. The vibrations will shift, and people who are resonating on a more subtle level, a natural level, are more open and softer on the inside and more gentle and things like this, more thoughtful and more giving and more positive, will thrive in the future after the post-apocalyptic debacle, the difficult time afterwards. But people who are sociopathic and negative just won't be able to survive. They'll just be suicidal and self-destructive. I mean, it's starting to happen already. They'll just be, taking themselves out left and right because they can't survive in this new paradigm in the way the world's going to be. So you don't have to worry about them. Like, God's already taken care of that stuff. I mean, it's already a part of a transitional period. But how you're going to survive the collapse of the system you're 100% dependent on, that's what everyone needs to think about. You have so much time between now and then to prepare yourself and your children for what's coming afterwards. And most people are just going to quit and lay down and give up, and they'll be taken off the world, and their soul will be put somewhere because they can't come back here and they can't move forward because they're in a really difficult position. I mean, or you can just run around, post stupid stuff on the internet and think that's going to work out for you. Only spirituality will save this world. It's Paul Roboto, definitely reporting from the Apocalypse and the Ascension. Everyone have a blessed day and be grateful.